Hey, I'm Alex Rackler from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Deus. Deus is a light abstracted Civ-light game in which you are going to be utilizing card combos to ultimately drive your engine, to drive your empire towards victory or defeat. Well, ideally towards victory. Driving your empire towards defeat is not something I generally recommend in life, board games, video games, or anything. And in Deus, ultimately your turn is going to consist of one of two actions. You are either going to construct a building on the board, and those buildings are going to be represented by cards in your hand, which give you 5 different building options plus a temple. Each card has in the top corner of it the resource types you will need, type or types, as well as the monetary costs of building that building on the board. You're going to then build it in a location adjacent to other buildings you have. So perhaps I look at my hand and I will build the war elephants over here, adding this to my row over here, grabbing one of my armies and putting it next to one of my other units on the board. And then, and this is the fun part of the game, I will then cascade all the abilities in that row of cards. You see, you have 5 different main cards in Deus, 5 different core types of cards, as well as the 6th card, which is the temple options, which is primary victory points based. But those 5 other card rows, what you're going to do is when you play a card and you put a building down on the board, you will then cascade the entire card row, triggering the ability not just on the card you played, but on every single other card in that row, utilizing all their benefits to drive whatever that particular type is. Perhaps it's the green cards, in which case you're going to be accumulating a whole bunch of resources as you drive that engine every time you place a new card. But you are capped out at 5 buildings for each type, and so you can't drive these engines forever. Each of your engines will be activated 5 times throughout the course of the game. That's action 1. That's the first thing you can do. The other thing you can do on your turn is you could take an offering action in which you're going to look at your hand of cards, utilize them for one benefit or another in order to discard those cards, and then do something. So for example, in this case, I will go ahead and discard these cards over here using the blue action. Temples are wild and can be counted as anything, and I'll discard them to the main pool. I will then take 8 money, 2 money per card discarded, and draw back up to 5. And so every one of the 5 types, again, in addition to being a building on its own, has a different unique offering. Perhaps you're offering your cards up for money like I just did, or perhaps you're offering it for resources, or perhaps for more cards, or for victory points, or to get more of your buildings from your supply to your player board, because you do need those buildings in order to build out more cards. Ultimately, Deus is going to be a game which you're driving towards the end game through either conquering the barbarian camps, acquiring victory through those, or building out multiple temples, and you need to build out all the supply of temples that will also trigger endgame. And each temple is worth up to 12 points, and that combined with a variety of the card types giving you in-game points as the game progresses, you'll be able to take a card action which will trigger, giving you 3 points for every spot on the board that you have 3 buildings of a type, which can drive 9, 12 victory points in a single shot, and you can repeat that again and again if you've built up the proper engine. Deus is a game all about that engine building, all about the card comboing, and all about delivering a satisfying strategy, a satisfying group of actions and choices that will hopefully win you the game. The main things I like about Deus, is to begin with, this game is easy to teach and get going. That concept that there's 2 main actions and that drives everything. You teach people those actions and you can get them up and running in about 5 minutes. There will be exceptions and nuances and slight adjustments you'll have to take into account, either teaching them before the game begins or as the game goes on. But the core idea of how this game plays is very easy to get up and running. The variability of each of the styles of the 5 colors is a lot of fun to play with. The blue cards are going to be very focused on trading and trading goods for other goods, selling goods, getting goods for resources, for victory points, all those different things. The green cards are going to be very focused on acquiring those actual resources. The yellow cards are going to be very victory point based. The trading post will be very gold based. And then the war elephants, or the military, is going to be very conquering barbarian camps, stealing money or victory points from other players, and things like that. Each of the 5 types does come with its own unique feel to the game, and they're fun. You can specialize in whatever card type appeals to you most, and they all provide viable strategies when combined with how you build out the rest of your domain. The choice between building a building and offering is fun. It's tense. There's an inherent desire to get more buildings out on the board, and it's important. As the map fills up, you will have a harder time going to different spots, and getting an early board state on that map is important. But also, getting more buildings in one spot is important, because many of the cards will reward you for having a ton of buildings in one spot. And also, building out offerings or taking offerings is important, because you can discard an entire hand of cards for 10 money, or for 5 resources, or to get 10 cards and do these different things that will reward your engine immensely but then you're not building up your board state. And that choice, that back and forth, and the ability, the fact that you can have a dead hand of buildings and cards that aren't useful for what you're currently trying to do, and then use an offering to just trade them in for the next batch of stuff. That is a lot of fun. It gives you options throughout this game, options that will make your choices hard, and that choice between which cards you're going to keep in your hand is tough, because so often you're going to want to keep that one card which will be useful 2 or 3 turns from now, but you might have to keep it through multiple offering phases. And so this is going to have a very Terraforming Mars feel of, you could just maximize things and just worry about the next card that's coming, or you should try to do whatever you can to hold on to that current card in your hand. The game has a cute little thing of the finite resources, in which the resources on the board are going to be limited by player count, and then from there, if you can't get wood, then you can't get wood. There's going to be a limit to the resources in the game, which means if one player has a particularly efficient engine at building up, let's say, wood, then you can potentially deprive the market of wood, hoarding it yourself and stopping their engine cold in its tracks. It's a lot of fun to actually mess with people's engines through the manipulation of the finite resource pool. Now, the resources are never completely final in terms of building things, because you can replace those resources with money, but in terms of the actual resources on the board, you can mess with someone's engine by depriving the board state of those resources. And ultimately, the biggest thing in this game is the card cascading is so much fun. I like powers and abilities in games. I've always liked powers and abilities in games, and triggering a row of 4 or 5 actions and doing every single ability along that chain is fun. It's rewarding to have built up that engine, to cash internet, getting points, resources, money, whatever it is your engine does. But if you build up that engine and you continue to develop and then you cascade it downwards, it's a lot of fun in this game. I love that aspect of Deus. In terms of things I didn't like in this game, there's a few things, not huge things, but definitely a few things. And to begin with, some of those rules, I mentioned that the game is easy to teach, and that's true. But there are a lot of these small little edge cases or confusing things that aren't immediately intuitive. Things like how the armies move around the board, the barbarian camps, and the tie-breaking aspect of whatever. The small, stupid stuff along the game that it makes what otherwise was a very simple game and just adds a little bit of extra tediousness in terms of small attention to detail and all these rules that don't stop you from starting the game, but will certainly get in your way as the game progresses. You can only have one of each building in each spot. The ships can go on water, but other buildings cannot go on water. Your temple counts as your own building, but can't be abandoned. Your army can move here, but not if your temple's there and it's the last building type. Lots of small little edge case rules that are just things you have to know that can get in the way of an otherwise smooth and streamlined game. The expansion, and this is the only time I'm going to talk about the expansion in this review, the expansion, while it adds a lot of options in terms of mixing up that game state, in terms of mixing up if the game ever gets dry or feels like you can't, like you've played out the combos, you know what's going on, you can mix in expansion decks, but the way it does it is through the alternating of full decks. So you can replace the entire yellow deck with the entire yellow deck in the Egypt expansion. And that's just in my experience, that I don't like that aspect of having to root through your entire deck to replace out one set of cards, because it just makes me less likely to pull it out and actually go through that. And so I happen to not like that style of adding cards into a game through expansions. And this is going to be a big one in this game. There is a lot of luck in the cards you draw in this game. There's a lot of luck in whether you got a good start to your engine, or whether you're going to have to go through multiple rounds of offerings before you can get a good combination of stuff to get on the board. Now, the good news, like I already covered this already, is the offerings do reward you in the game, so it's not the end of the world. But there will be times when even your hand of offering cards isn't really helpful. You start the game with a hand of a few brown cards and perhaps a few red cards, and you're off to a bad start because you can't actually cash them in for resources or money, which are important in the beginning of the game. And so there can be a lot of luck in the way you draw different cards and the way the cards you draw combo with the engine you've been building. Perhaps you are someone who's been building up, trying to focus on multiple buildings in one spot, and you just don't draw the cards that reward you for having multiple buildings in one spot. There's definitely a decent amount of luck. The offerings will mitigate it. The fact that you can turn in your cards rapidly every single turn will mitigate it, but it's still definitely present. As far as what I can see others not liking, to begin with, that finite resources thing, while I like it, I've been in more than a few games of this game in which people are not happy about the fact that their engine's being jammed because Jack across the table there is just being a jerk with that wood. And so that is something that I have seen people visibly frustrated by. It doesn't bother me. To me, it's part of the strategy of the game. You built up your engine, you focused on wood, and someone's depriving you of it. But it can be frustrating. It can feel like a cog in the wheel of what you have been focusing on, and it might take away that fun element of how much of a thing you have worked on and you have built. The downtime between turns is going to be something that's going to vary by group. For me, I didn't include this in my own thing of things I didn't like because mostly I would say it has been pretty decent. That being said, I have been in a few games where, especially as you combo down a cascade of 4 or 5 cards, your turn can take longer than other people at the table like, and people are just waiting for you to finish your 4 or 5 card. And especially some of these cards, the way they'll work is they will activate other cards. So you go down your row and you're like, well, activate a blue card. Okay, now I have to go over here and trade this in and do this. You can have longer turns, especially as the longer cascading goes. To me, it was not bad enough to put in things that would turn me off the game, but it's certainly something worth mentioning. Overpowered combos is a thing that I don't have a problem with, but I have seen complaints about in general, which is the idea that there are certain specific combinations or strategies you can go for in this game that are just broken. They're just, too overpowered and they will drive a win for you, and this game is therefore inherently broken and not worth playing. And my answer there is pretty simple. I've played this game maybe 6, 7 times, somewhere in that range, and I haven't noticed anything to that degree. Could it possibly exist? 100% it could. I've seen it mentioned, I've seen it countered, so I thought it was worth bringing it up, but I haven't personally experienced it in 6 or 7 plays, and I don't know if I would or how many plays it would take to notice that. And then lastly, and this again, I mentioned this as a pro, but giving up cards that you want to hold on to in order to draw more cards is another thing that can be frustrating. If you're sitting there and you're like, well, these 2 cards are perfect, but at first I need to get at least 1 blue card so I can do this engine and turn this into that and do that. But then you hold on to these cards for 3 rounds of offerings, giving up your efficiency in the game. Again, it could be frustrating for people to have to deal with those. As far as my final thoughts on Deus is a game that you might think by now is staying in my collection, and sadly, it is not. And the reason for that is actually pretty simple, which is, this is a game that I like more than anyone else I have played it with. This is a game where, for me, I enjoy Deus. Every time I've played it, I love the cascading card rows. I really appreciate that. The rest of the board is okay to me. The rest of the game is fine. I just like playing out cards one after another in terms of cascading the different rows that I'm trying to build up. I find that immensely rewarding and immensely fun. The rest of the game around it is okay. It's nothing to write home about. It's a solid engine. It just doesn't do anything special. For me, it's the cascading card rows that I find particularly enjoyable. And at the end of the day, because of the fact that every person in my game group that I have played Deus with has felt it was okay and rarely ever asks to play it, while my feelings about Deus are overall positive, and while I would recommend this game, it is also not a game that I feel strongly enough about to fight for. It's not a game I feel strongly enough about to try to push towards the table when other people aren't in the mood, or to try to continuously introduce new people, hoping that other people will enjoy it as much as I do. And again, I enjoy it, I like it, I do recommend it, but I don't love it, and it's not a game that I'm currently willing to fight for. And so unfortunately, Deus will be leaving my collection, but I still think you should try it out, because, well, it's fun, and cascading card rows and combos and abilities and all that. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions or comments down below. And as always, have a good one.